Okay, and I will leave you, Jacob, to do the introduction and get things kicked off, and then I'll be back for the Q&A.
Okay, I'm glad to welcome at DecisionCAMP the academic team from KU Leuven University. And what is interesting, this team started, not only this team, KU Leuven in general, and probably under the influence of Jan van Sienen, they became very active in DMN, considering DMN, different DMN extensions. For example, in last 2 years, we heard quite interesting framework what they offered, they actually built and offered to include to DMN based on constraint programming, and they call this CDMN. This year, they offer new extension of DMN, and they call this Deontic DMN. While they cannot resist to use academic terms, probably not known to regular people. I also did not know the word deontic, but also they use bit string and semantics and other things. But basically, they offer to extend DMN with such concepts as obligation, prohibition, permission, and this quite wide practical domain what we have to deal with in real life. I'm really looking forward to your presentation, Boy.
All right, thank you, Jacob. So, hi everyone. Welcome to my talk on the extension of the DMN with deontic terms. So as you can see from this, as Jacob had introduced, the deontic term is mostly about the obligation, permission, those are related terms. So before I start, I will just have a good overview so that you know where we're heading. So at first, I will just shortly introduce DMN, although I feel like I don't need to do that much in this group because I think most of you are very familiar with DMN, but I will just quickly give an overview and currently what kind of extension we have on DMN, at least from research group in our school. So, and then I will start to introduce what are the deontic terms, and then I will just give a few examples of it, and then we'll turn to why we need to do this extension, because as far as I can see, at least in the current DMN setup, they didn't have any specification deontic representation, which could be a problem. And then because of this problem, so then we go going back to philosophy, because they have a lot of work on working on the relationship between different deontic terms. We borrow some of the concept there and try to see how we can make it work to extend the DMN. And of course, by this extension, there will be some heat up as well, because we can, as you know, that the philosophical interpretation doesn't always match with how the common people interpret those terms. So at the end of the day, we probably need to do some of the verification with the human experiment to see which kind of interpretation would actually work, and then make it more usable to the human user and the domain expert. And finally, there will be a 2-point at the end. I will go through later, that at the end we will see the deontic DMN will be done by creating what we call the judgment template, and also how we can combine multiple judgments together. And we will go along with the slide. You will see more clearly how we are going to there. All right. So at the start, so what is DMN? I think most of you know that DMN is a decision model and notation. Basically, it's a specification of business decision and business rule. It's defined in such a way that it's very easily readable by people in the decision management and people working in the field as well. So in our school, we already have done a few different extensions. I think there's, as Jacob introduced earlier, the CDMM is the is a extension that deal with the constraint reasoning as well. We also have working with other extensions such as the PDMN, so the probabilistic reasoning. For now, this talk will be focused on what we call the deontic reasoning, and then you can short form call it the DDMN. So in line with the just adding a alphabet before the DMN, and also actually at the in this series of the declarative AI conference, actually our colleagues actually also working on why we need a new value in DMN as well. I think he presented in the WML on Monday. So if you are interested in that, actually I'm putting those link and reference at the end of the slide, so you can refer back to it as well. Okay. So, what is or what are the deontic terms? So I have a few examples. So you can see the obligation, obligatory, forbidden, permitted. It's not a term that you will see day-to-day life, especially when you come to the rules. So for example, you can see the traffic rule, the stop sign actually telling you must stop there. You also have the this is a forbidden to enter sign in the traffic rules, and also you have some other rules just like there is maybe at the left you will see that there is no unauthorized entry, then you have the permit to work and must be obtained. So this kind of concept with the permission must or even other terms that you may do that, you can do that. These kind of things is also regarding is what we call the deontic term. So you can think of this sign is just something that certain action, if you do it, you will have a certain judgment to that. So if you say, oh, you must do that, then yeah, you normally will just, of course, in practice, you can still not do that, but at the end, you will get a very bad judgment or being frowned upon if you do that, you violate your obligations, something like that. So this is just an idea of what is deontic terms. So as I say that at the beginning, I see that in DMN there is a problem with representing deontic terms. Using that, of course, I would start it off with an example, starting a quite an innocent example. And as an example, you may see that actually there's no problem at all. So what I call this is a light switch example. So this light switch example consists of two rules. So the first one is if you are in the room, the lights must be on. So you can think of it because it's a safety reason. So if you are working in the room, you must have a light on, otherwise it's not safe to work there at all. But when you're not in the room, the light must be on. Then you can think of it as an eco-friendly rule. So that's why you don't want to waste energy, especially nowadays the energy price is so high. Then you don't want to waste any energy. Also, you may have a rule like that. And then we combine these two rules, then you think it's very easy to represent it in DMN. You just say, having the input in the room, if it's yes, then the light will be on. If it's no, the light is off. One of them, then you may think why we need to think about the deontic terms or whatsoever. This seems like it can perfectly represent what's happening here. But bear with me that actually here, this table are actually a representative of two rules together. One rule is a safety rule, another rule is the eco-friendly rule. And then if actually we only have one either of them, what will happen to the DMN table? Okay, let's have a look. So first of all, let's go off the safety rule. So the original phrasing of the safety rule is when you are in the room, the light must be on. So you may think, I'll check it in the room. Oh yes, you're in the room, the light may be on. But if you're not in the room, actually, it can go either way because it doesn't specify whether the light should be on or not should be on. So it's a question mark here. Of course, if you can phrase this another way, so actually you can say, when you're in the room, the light must be on. You can phrase as basically saying that when you are not in the room, the light can be off, and then you can think of the on is the default. Then you can say, then we now have the no, that you're not in the room, the light can be off, so this can be off. And then yes, because the light is default, so you're on. But you might think that, this on actually will be slightly different than this on, the meaning, even though you say the same thing here, but it's something different. So actually what's happening here? Actually, the two lights here are telling a different story. The first one here is actually asking about does the light have to be on? So in the room, the first phrasing, of course, you are saying yes, the lights must be on, and then if you're not in the room, no, it's not on. But the second phrasing actually asking a slightly different question, and asking about can the light be off? Actually, so if you're not in the room, of course, the light can be off, but it's just saying it can be off. But if you are in the room, the light cannot be off because of the safety issue. So this this is a slightly different phrasing and a different question, but in the end, at the end, we will come up with the safety rule. Actually, we will judge the light, is it on or off? It will become that more clear that if you're in the room, the lights have to be on, and if not, the light can be off. Then actually you will see that there will be subtle difference between, can be off is a different thing, being it has to be off, and then, so we want to capture this kind of subtle differences. But normally in DMN, we don't really explicitly do that. And then, so if you really want to do it, you need to wipe the whole face out so that we know that there's the subtle difference. And then in the later on, we will see that that would cause some difficulties because if you want to have multiple tables and then you want to reason it together, the computer cannot immediately know the relationship with what it can be or has to be unless you specify the relationship and make that reason with that. So, I mean, you can represent in DM, traditional DM now with those kind of what you must do, what you can do like that, but you can represent it in a sentence of word. But if you want to do further reasoning and try to combine multiple tables, then without further specify those kind of relationship, then you cannot really make a good conclusion, and then you need to look it manually. And then, as you know, now we have a simple example, maybe it will be easier. But when you pile up with lot of different tables, as you will see that, then it will become very difficult. So this is just a counter example, what we call the eco-friendly rule. So basically it's following the same reasoning, but now we just come up with that the judgment now is, yes, if you do, the light can be on rather than has to be on. And then if you're not in the room, the lights have to be off, compared to the safety rule, that is the light can be off. Now wait. So now we have the both rule together. Yeah, so as I say that you can see the differences between the rules. There's a subtle difference it can be and has to be. And then of course, as I said earlier, you combine the rule, it seems completely fine. You can just say, okay, the lights have to be on, it has to be off together. And then you can, okay, you can just replace like, okay, in the room, the lights are on, not in the room, the light is off. But the thing is, if you represent the rules separately, how can you, without further specify the relationship with the Deontic term, the system itself will not be able to deduct to this both rule table. They cannot say, okay, because look at this, they will say, okay, it must have to be on, I have to be on. No, they cannot able to do that. So now that's create a problem. So hopefully in the lecture, by introduce the philosophical concept and by specify the relationship between the different Deontic terms, then we can make the system automatically to draw on the conclusion, and then we don't need to judge it. We don't need to write this table ourselves, and the computer can generate this table themselves. All right. So and the issue regarding what we call the difference between the definition and judgment. So as you can see that when you come to the Deontic terms, You can say, oh, in the room, the light is on, not in the room, the light is off. This sort of thing is actually what's called the ideal scenario. So it's what you prefer to be. So if you're in the room, we prefer that the light to be on, actually. I mean, even though they say must be on, yeah, but it can be still violated. And then in the room, no, the lights must be off. But in some situations, you can still say that some people just don't follow the rule and the light is still on. And this actually is different from what we call a definition table. So you can say that that is lights on a definition is when the brightness level is above 0, then that will call the light is on. If the light brightness 0 is equal to 0, then we'll say the light is off. Then this is a definition. Then it won't be a situation that when the brightness is more than 0, we will still call the light is off or something. No, it's a definition. It's the same as just like, for example, if you have an age, you define the age above 18 is an adult, then you won't be, and then smaller, younger than 18 is a child, then you won't go out there one. You cannot say, okay, you're 70, but you are adult here. No, in here is sort of like a definition. So we see that these two are two different things. But in the traditional DMN, how we do it, we just treat it the same. And then that's really a problem because we know that on the left, by definition, then you won't have the mismatch situation. But on the right, you can still have people that not follow the rule, and that could perfectly fine to happening. And then later on, when you have the system that sometimes we will even making on rules on people that are violating, just like, okay, if they are in the not in the room, but the light is not on, but light is not off, and then what happens next? They may have a business rule about that as well, but that could have happened. But if you don't differentiate, then you are basically saying that that could not have happened at all. So that's create the issue here. So because of these issues, so we are coming back now. We are going to we need to look at the relationship between the different deontic terms. Very luckily for us, philosophers or logicians have been studying this relationship for hundreds of years, if not thousands. So they have actually come up with a very nice what we call the hexagon, and then they come up with 6 key terms, either deontic terms that would be help to form a concept of obligation and permission and something like that. So these 6 terms, they all related to each other somehow with 4 different types of relationship. I will go through it one by one so that you have an idea of what's happening here. So I will start off with the most familiar relationship of everyone, I suppose, that is the obligation, relationship, and permission. So what you must do and what you can allow to do. So I think everyone will agree that if you are allowed to do something, so for example, you are allowed to join this Zoom call, then you also, sorry, let me rephrase it again. So if you say that you are obligated to join this Zoom call, then it must imply that you are allowed to join this Zoom call. So basically, in this relationship, what we call is entailment or strict entailment, or in the philosophical term is called in subordinate relation. So basically, which means that if the first one would imply the second one. So if you're obligated to join this Zoom course, it will imply that you're allowed to join this Zoom course. I can say also the same another relation. You may say if the option to join this Zoom course, and this also imply that you are allowed to join this Zoom course and so on. And another more interesting idea is the contradictory relationship, which means that this relation is specified that if one is true, the other must be true, and then if one is false, the other must be false. So that I say one thing. If one is true, the other must be false. If one is false, the other must be true. So they cannot be true together and they cannot be false together. So this relationship is easily seen in permission and prohibition or forbidden. So for example, if you're allowed to join the Zoom call, then it must be the opposite of that. It must not be the case that you are forbidden to join this Zoom calls. So this cannot be. So if you're allowed to join this here, then you're not forbidden to join here. Or the other way around, so if you are forbidden to join here, then you will not be allowed to be here, and so on. So, and then you can see that. So now we have introduced the concept of the obligation, permission, forbidden, and optional. I think these four terms will be most familiar for most people. But there's the two other terms. So for the first term, I'll join here the release one. So is actually what is the opposite of obligation. So what you mean by that is, so for example, if you're obligated to join the army, let's say example, that would be the opposite from you are released from the duty of joining the army. So that's the opposition of that. So so that's the contrary relationship. And the optional and non-optional, and then also will be easier. So if you are it's an option, it's an optional thing to join this Zoom call, in opposed to it's not optional thing to join this Zoom call. Then you can be think of this can be either you are obligated to join this Zoom call, or you are being forbidden to join this Zoom call. So that's why it's not an optional thing. So the other two relationship, there is a contrary relationship, where it's saying that it cannot be true together, but it can be forced together. So it means easier to see from the obligatory and the forbidden. So for example, if you say you are obligated to come here in this meeting, then it must not be forbidden for you to come here in this meeting. And the other, if you are forbidden to come to this meeting, you are not obligated to come to this meeting. But it can be also the case that you either have the obligation to come to this meeting, or you're being banned from coming to this meeting. So that's what you mean say that they can be true together, but they cannot be true together, but they can be forced together. And the final resistance of contrary is the other one, so they can be true together but cannot be forced together. So this is an overview of the 6 different Deontic terms, and then this hexagon is sort of just like drawing the relationship among the different terms. So I hope that I didn't get you guys lost here now, but that is just a very key important step to draw this relationship, because later on it will help us to how we automatically reasoning the decision, and then you don't need to make the decision, especially on the decision the end result yourself. All right, good. So now we have these terms, but of course in our research group, actually, I'm working under a project called the Big Share project. We are having 4 different disciplines coming together. We have philosophers, linguists, psychologists, and computer sciences who come together. And then in this project, we are actually finding the application of what we call the Bayesian semantics. So that's why I kind of sneaking in the Bayesian semantic here. But of course, it's also having usefulness in the Bayesian semantic here as well, because we've seen that the different Deontic terms, and then we actually kind of making a judgment here. So we can, okay, we are seeing that some rules have a Deontic term. So you are obligated to do something, you are allowed to do something, or you are being banned to do something. And then probably you have some statement about that, or the rules about that. Then you have certain action. We want to see these certain actions. So for example, let's say you're obligated to come to this meeting, and then you come to this meeting as an action. Then we want to see whether this action is the relationship with the action to the discount statement. And so we can find this discount statement or rules normally have 3 different status, or you can say discount statement can be fulfilled by your action, or this statement is kind of neutral to your action, or discount statement is kind of violated by your action. So because of these 3 different status, so Actually, we can use the bitstring semantic very nicely because bitstring semantic, what it boils down is, I'm here given a high level view. It's just a sequence of bits 0 and 1, and each bit provide an answer to a meaningful binary questions. So at the end, so you can see that, okay, so we can represent the obligatory into 3 different bits because we have 3 different meaningful questions. And then we can say that, okay, if you are obligated doing B, then doing P will be 100. So will be yes to the first question, no to the second question, no to the third question. What they mean by that is, so if you come to this meeting and then you have an allocation to this meeting, then you come to this meeting will be fulfilling the obligation, but of course, the obligation is not neutral to your action to come in here because you have an obligation to do here. And definitely your obligation is not violated by you coming to this meeting. So that's why it's a yes, no, no situation. And the forbidden is the other one. So if, for example, if you are forbidden to come to this meeting and then you come to this meeting anyway, then your action of coming to this meeting, it definitely is a violation to the statement that the prohibition to come to here. But of course, your action here definitely not fulfilling the prohibition. And of course, it's definitely not neutral to there. And then finally, the other example, the permitted, you can see the 110, so yes, yes, no. So I will first come with a no. So for example, you will say you are now to join this meeting. Of course, coming to this meeting is not a violation of this permission, but the permission itself maybe can be interpreted as if so if you come to the meeting, you can think of is you can either fulfilling this permission or being neutral to this permission. So instead of different people have different interpretation. So that's why we say yes to both because it can be interpreted in this way. So both of them can be interpreted this way. And then you can also think of this, the permission is the opposite of forbidden. So that's why this, the bitstring is basically a fit of all the bitstring here. So given this example, then we can already assign the bitstring to each of the terms. So as you can see, the optional itself will be is neutral, is neither being fulfilled or violated, and so on. So now we have the bitstring interpretation of the Deontic lexicon. I sort of flatten it out a bit. So you can, if you're obligatory, when you're doing P issue, you fulfill it, permitted, you are permitted, then it's not violated, and so on. And because of we represent like this, so that the Deontic term actually can be represented in terms of obligation and permission. You can check it yourself, but I'm not going to go through too much in detail now. So basically, because of how we represent bitstring, we can actually write down the obligation, other term in terms of obligation and permission. So for example, forbidden can be written as it's not you are forbidden to do something, then you mean that you're not permitted to do something. And if you are optional to do something, which means that you are permitted to do something, and then it's also not obligatory to do that thing. So that's a way of the Deontic term permission in terms of obligation permission. But one extra thing in philosophical interpretation is because for them they find that this just represent just in terms of permission and obligation is not enough. They want to very simple. They just want to represent everything in terms of obligation. So there's an additional assumption for them to be make it is that the permission to do something is equivalent or defined as not obligated to do, not P. So to give an example, so let's say you are permitted to turn on the light, that would be the same as, at least with this additional assumption, would be it's not obligated to turn off the light. So by this additional assumption, then we can represent the only term in terms of obligatory alone. And then as a result, because of this assumption, So when the opposite, so if you have obligation to join the meeting, and then you say, okay, if I'm not joining the meeting, what's the status there? Because of this assumption, then we can add a second rule that is matching up with this assumption. So at the end, for example, you can say that now, you will say your obligation to join the meeting. Then you have, when you do join the meeting, then you do fulfill this obligation. But if you do not join the meeting, then you are violating your obligation. So this is an additional assumption with this interpretation. So with this, we are coming back to DMN with all the philosophical relationship we have defined now, then we can say that, okay, we can have an obligation rules. So that, for example, if you have a rule saying that the lights must be on, then you can have the input that is, so we can say what your action is, a light on or off. Then you can have your deontic judgment. Okay, if a light is on, you are fulfilling this obligation. Your light is off, you are violating the obligation. Then you can also have the permission rules as well when the light can be off. Okay, so you have the permission to light off. So when the light is off, then you're definitely not violating your permission rules. So not violating. And then if your light is on, you're definitely not fulfilling the permission rules. So you can see that I'm using a log here. I already sneak in the syntax within the CDMN, the constraint DMN, which I will talk a bit more later on. So that is just a extension that been done by my co-workers. So it seems like it seems like we are now can nicely represent the deontic judgment we got into DMN. But there is a kick up, as I mentioned earlier. So for example, so what we call the alternative interpretation. So in philosophy term, we interpret the obligation as if you have obligation to join this meeting, for example, if join the meeting you fulfill, you don't join, you're violating the obligation. But I think a lot of us will think that actually, if you don't join the meeting, it's not a violating of the obligation. Maybe simply you're just not fulfilling your obligation. Then so this kind of different interpretation will affect this different interpretation will actually affect how we are going to draw the conclusion later on. So I think it's a very a little slightly important that is we need to be clear that when we try to represent the DM table about, let's say, obligation, we need to be clear that what actually the people writing the rule have in mind, what the obligation is that have they in mind means. Does that mean that when you don't do that is a violation of the obligation, or is it simply not fulfilled? Because that will be have a very different consequences when we try to make the judgment. And then I have for me, I have a small speculation. And then this speculation is actually related to more with a linguistic meaning interpretation thing. So whether it's the violated interpretation is a pragmatical enrichment of meaning of not fulfilled interpretation, what we call the scalar implicature. So I will just like draw off the word a little bit and talk about what is scalar implicature. So in linguistic, there is a phenomenon what we call the scalar implicature. So basically, is a tendency of people attribute implicit meaning beyond the explicit literal meaning of a sentence. So and then it suggests that the speaker have a reason for not using a more informative term. So you can say now that the obligatory actually is a more informative than the permitted on the same scale. So let's go with an example. So for example, you will say that you are permitted to turn on the light. Literally speaking, you are talking about you are permitted and possibly obligated to turn on the light. But normally, when we commonly interpret it, we will interpret it as more with line with the pragmatical interpretation is you are permitted but not obligated to turn on the light. Yeah, that is because that we know that if we normally give out this information, if it's obligatory to turn on the light, we will say is it obligatory to you are obligatory to turn on the light, rather than say you are permitted to turn on the light. By saying that you are permitted, we are to turn on the light, you can't implicitly say that you are not obligated to turn on the light. So that's why we have the pragmatical interpretation here. So so these are different interpretation. Maybe we can deal with this kind of phenomenon we observe in linguistics as well. So let's come back to how we are going to solve this in the what we call the Deontic DMN. So so one way we can think of is we can give them a template, because for example, in the obligation, we can see already, although we have two different interpretations, but they are kind of quite fixed in a sense that, so if you have an action, if the action is true, then you are fulfilling your obligation. If this action is false, you are violating the obligation. And this interpretation, I would call it a sort of obligation template. While you can have another obligation template, we can say that, okay, if the action is true, then you fulfill your obligation. But if your action is false, you're just not fulfilling your obligation. So we can say this can be called a weak obligation template. And overall, because you have the doing the action and the opposite of doing that action, and then you have so for each action you have a 3 bit of the bit string, and in total you have 6 bits. So to the power of 6 is 64. So at the end you only have 64 templates in total. But yeah, but of course, not all 64 are relevant. Only some of them are really closely to what we call the obligation. And I'm just showing obligation here as an example. But in other cases, you can also have permission and therefore prohibition as well. So the idea here is that we cannot give them the possible interpretation people will make regarding certain terms, and then we will then we show that what is the judgment regarding each action to and then by doing so, then the people who are making the DMN, they can choose that which one is a best fit their interpretation of the rules, because because different people interpret differently. So normally when it comes to represent the business rule, we of course we want to fit into the what the people writing the rule have in mind. So that's I was suggesting by providing different template, make the people writing down the rules will realize that actually what is the judgment of them regarding certain action more clearly, so that to avoid the ambiguity, the different type of obligation. So so at the end, once we have that, so we back to our safety rules. So remember, when the safety rule actually have two different the origin phase, and when you are in the room, the light must be on. But actually, people also normally maybe what have they have people when this rule have in mind is when you are not in the room, the light can be off as well. So basically, you have two different conditions. So basically, what you can do is just have attach the template to each of the conditions. So the in the room condition and not in the room condition. And then regarding the light action, you have the on and off. Then you can be fulfilled or violated. And then and the no condition, it can be off, is a kind of permission to be off something. So in off, permission also is not violated, and on is not fulfilled. So this is a representation of the safety rule regarding the Deontic judgment. So you can write it like this. So similarly, for the eco-friendly rules, you can following the similar logic and write it like that as well. So at the end, so remember we have two different rules. So we have the in the room condition and the light action. Regarding each rule, they have a different judgment. But at the end, of course, we are not satisfied that we have two different judgments. We want to have a single judgment for the whole set of the rules. So how could we are going to combine those kind of rules and all? And of course, intuitively we see, because we know that the end result, we will combine it together both rules. We know that actually, yes, the lights have to be on, and no, the lights have to be off. So we can intuitively, or maybe can copy it together. But remember, this table is not really, it's not automatically generated by the computer. It's actually, we are looking at it's based on our common understanding of the rules, and then we come up with this table and with this judgment. So how can we tell the just like the system to automatically generate combined judgment together? It turned out that actually combining different judgments, depending on how you like to combine different rules, can have a different combination. But I'm just using one that I believe that is most intuitive to most people. So for we will normally say that you're violating a set of rules if you violate any one of them. So that's why you will have, if your judgment 1 is violated, either judgment 1 is violated or judgment 2 is violated, then you can request all violated. Oh yeah, I have to be here. So you can see these two tables. They are basically representing the same thing. This table here is just representing a DMN format, but of course it's a little bit hard to immediately see what the result is. So that I transfer it into a so judgment 1 and judgment 2, then you can immediately see what's the result here. So both of them basically the same. So you can see if either of them is violated, you will say violated rules. But if you have a set of rules, and then you have if none of them is violated, and then you have one rule have to be fulfilled somehow, at least one rule have to be fulfilled somehow, then you will say that okay, this set of the rule will be fulfilled. And then at the end, if all the rules, the action is neutral to them, then you can say neutral. So basically, you can use the table and then sort of mix and match, and then come up with the combined judgment. So before I'm moving on to end result of the combined judgment, I will talk about actually those are combination can be think of is building on the constraint reasoning CDMN, and because the CDM the standard DMN actually normally is just only provide a single solution for a set of the input, while actually CDMN are providing a solution space. So basically, you just possibly you can have a set of possible decisions you can make. So a lot of set function in the model. And then actually what happened in the only judgment is we only have 3 different things. We are either fulfilled or neutral or violated. And then as a result, when we say about not fulfilled, we're actually thinking about is it either neutral or violated? Or when we say violated, is it either not violated, is either fulfilled or neutral? So basically, you think it's either relationship, then we can actually just using the table we have mentioned here, but you think of, and then this after or not fulfilled as if either neutral or violated. And then because if you're neutral and combined violated is violated, violated combined violated is also violated. So violated or violated is still violated. So the combined solution is violated. And of course, you can do the similar thing with combine others as well. So you can combine everything together. So now it seems very nicely is back to if you are in the room, the light is on, then you are fulfilling this set of rules. And if you are in the room, if the light is off, then you are violating this set of rules. And then that's this final table. Actually, coming back is actually is coming back with what we are hoping for to achieve with the both rule and then normally what we can conclude there. And then the final remark here is that so we can likely see that actually each of the data for each rule, and then we can by having these two, we can automatically generate the combined judgment. Given that we already specify how we're going to combine the different judgment as well. So at the end of the day, as I mentioned that before, that actually the philosophical interpretation may actually a bit different from how people are interpreting those terms. So I'm just here showing an example coming from the field of what we call the experimental pragmatics. So it's a field, interdisciplinary field between psychology and linguistics. So they is a result that I know recently. Is a conference I went to last week, and then it's very interesting because it's kind of matched with how we interpret those kind of terms. So as you recall, early on we have a term called release. It's sort of the opposite of obligation. So so basically, if you are released from doing something, then you are definitely not obligated to do that. Then this release term, if you're between 0, 1, 1, you can interpret either it's a neutral thing or a violating thing. And then this actually, as someone in that conference also doing something with the Deontic interpretation as well. And then they actually make an example saying that, so they're giving a case of some mother say you need not eat the plum, and the girl eat the plum anyway, and then they will ask the participant to judge this kind of action. And then we'll say that most adults are judging girl action neutral, while most children are judging it negatively. So you can see that actually it's kind of the same, because the need not to eat the plum is the same as you are kind of released from the obligation in eating a plum or something like that. So we can see that actually is here is a match with the interpretation, philosophical interpretation of the term of release. But this interpretation, it could be forced to go either way, and then when you are a child, you are forced, you are more will go with the violated interpretation, while if you are adult, you go with neutral. So yeah, it's just a given example, and at the end of it is in order to make this Deontic DMN work, I think that it's very important for us to doing some human judgment experiments to see how people are interpreting those kind of things. So to compare the philosophical interpretation versus what we call the folk interpretations or the common people interpretation as well. And by doing so, then we can find the best labeling for different Deontic judgment templates, or even suggest which kind of template they are using, because we already earlier see that just for the obligation, already they have 2 different interpretations. And then by doing this how a human judgment experiment, then we can see that actually commonly which interpretation would be normally being used. And then with doing so, or even though how people are interpreting terms, so then we can relate this type term with different templates, and then we can rank the template by the most likely people interpret this way accordingly. So at the end, so to conclude, so the Deontic DMN is actually building on some philosophical insights. So we are seeing all the Deontic hexagon and the vision semantic, which can help us to specify relationship and how to calculate the relationship, and then to make a calculate in the system automatically. And also about my colleagues work already on the CDMN, which can be helpful in building the Deontic DMN as well. And then the most core 2 things in the Deontic DMN thing is the Deontic judgment template, which is the template that's telling that, okay, what is a judgment of a certain action, interpret those terms. And then also the judgment composition rules, because normally we are not dealing with one rules, we're dealing with multiple rules, but we want to do a judgment with a set of rules. So we need to specify how we are going to combine them. With these 2 together, then we can automatically to conclude what kind of judgment we have here. So the Deontic DMN, to conclude the goal, there's one slide I mentioned about is the separation of the Deontic rules from the factual consequences of definition, because we already see that the factual definition if you have the input, the output must be the case. They can go the other way around. But the Deontic rules normally will put that the action is an output, and then but those action doesn't have to match your input. It's just in the ideal scenario they have to match. So that's why we put on Deontic DMN, so that in a way we are moving the action back to sort of an input state, and then only the Deontic judgment as an output, so that we can tell if the inconsistency actually coming from the Deontic inference or coming from the definition. And then also you can help to refine the human Deontic judgment a bit more refined way, so to avoid the ambiguity as well. At the end, we are going to do some experiment on human. That will be my work in the next 2 years of my PhD, to just try to find the best representation in the Deontic DMN. So overall, the last thing I just want to talk about the contribution of our team. So as you heard earlier, our team actually is a very diverse team, have a multidisciplinary team. I'm situated, I'm an AI researcher, but I'm situated between psychology and computer science. And the 3 other authors with this presentation are all my supervisors. So we have Professor Schaeken, that is on the psychological point of view. We have the Professor Joost Vennekens. I think you guys may know him in the previous last year presentation or so on. He is focusing on the industrial application of the AI technology and stuff like that. And then we also have Professor Lorenz Demey. He is the logician, and he also the founder of the vision semantics. So that's why he had a lot with the philosophical insight in this presentation. All right, so that's all on my presentation. If you're interested in the reference I mentioned, that would be it. And now it's come to the Q&A session.
Okay, thanks very much. We don't have very much time left. We're kind of running a little bit late there. You had a lot of material. There's actually a number of questions over in Slack that I'd ask you to take a look at afterwards. I know that Ron Ross had a number of things about Deontic judgment and SBBR and so on, some of the overlaps there. So I think that there's some interesting discussion points. I don't know if you've been watching that. Jacob did ask about what the KU Leuven work on probabilistic reasoning is and PDMN. I know that Jan posted 1 or 2 of the links, but do you have any particular feedback on the probabilistic reasoning and PDMN?
Not really, because it's my co-worker who are working on this. I only know it. They try to say, but yeah, for anyone who are interested, we have the link there. And also, if you are having question about it, you can send me the email. I will forward it to the right person, or you can you can also find. So it's a Simon is the main contributor on the first author on this paper. He will also answer regarding the probabilistic DMN as well.
Okay. Jan also had an interesting observation that DMN is now in a lot of different areas in academia. It's not just a computer science thing anymore, or it's now philosophy, it's linguistics, it's computer science. And I think, you know, as we look at some of the discussion points that Ron had as well, it was that this is not just about something that's computed. There's a lot of things like what happens if somebody doesn't do something that they are supposedly obligated to do. So there's so there's a lot of interpretation there.
Yeah, so that's also one of the inspiration why I try to do the extension of the Deontic DMN, because we see that we also have a lot of rule regarding people not following the rules. So we want to represent that as well.
Right. Okay, good. I think I'm going to cut it off there. It's if you can head over to Slack and take a look at some of the discussions there, and then we can get up for the